The sound of the rain pounding against the basement window was deafening, each drop a reminder of the cold prison Travis Morgan had lived in for 2 years. At 72, the veteran had given up everything for a family that betrayed him, including his dignity. But tonight, as he knelt beside his loyal dog Sarge, a chilling whisper echoed through the floorboards above. "Tomorrow we kill the dog and then we lock the old man away for good." Travis's blood ran cold. He had hours, just hours to save the one being he trusted. But what he didn't know was that escaping might cost him more than he ever expected. Travis stood in the dim basement, the sound of the rain outside drowning everything but the weight of the moment. Sarge, his loyal German shepherd, lay still on the cold floor, his body aching with age and the damp chill of the concrete. The only light in the room came from the flickering bulb overhead, casting long, lonely shadows that seemed to stretch forever. The words from above replayed in Travis's mind. "Tomorrow we kill the dog, and then we lock the old man away for good." His heart pounded in his chest. He had trusted them. He had sacrificed everything to protect Todd, and now this. Betrayal didn't sting, it burned. But he wasn't the same man who had walked into this basement 2 years ago. The promise he'd made to Grace, his late sister, had kept him shackled here. But tonight, as he looked at the dog, he swore to protect something shifted. Sarge needed him just as much as he needed Sarge. And Travis wasn't about to let anyone take that away. But escaping wouldn't be easy. The question was no longer just how to get out, it was whether he could survive what was coming next. The basement was not a place for someone like Travis Morgan. He had spent his younger years in the rugged wilderness, hiking trails high in the mountains where the air was thin and the world seemed endless. But at 72, he found himself deep beneath a house in a damp, cold space that seemed to echo with his regrets. The sound of the relentless November rain against the small basement window was like a metronome, reminding him of the passing time, each second lost to the dark corners of a life that no longer fit him. His body had slowed with age, but it was his mind that had begun to fight the most. Travis had always been a man of action, someone who had lived by his own code. He had seen the worst of humanity in wars and in life, but never had he imagined this being imprisoned in a basement cut off from the world he had once known. A world of open skies and untouched terrain now, a distant memory. The air down here was thick with the smell of mildew, cold stone, and dust. It clung to his clothes, his skin. The walls were bare and the flickering bulb above only cast long, jagged shadows across the concrete floor. Everything in this room felt temporary, even though it had been 2 years since he'd been forced into this place. The single bed in the corner was more of a cot than anything, a thin mattress, the edges frayed, its saggy middle, a reflection of his own sinking spirit. There was no warmth, no comfort, and certainly no sense of home. This basement had become a cage he had willingly walked into thinking it was his duty, his promise, a promise to his sister Grace. Grace had asked him to look after her son Todd before she passed. Todd had been a good kid, then reckless but good, but somewhere along the way Todd had changed, and Travis had paid the price for it. He had sold his cabin, emptied his savings, given everything he had to protect the family he loved. Yet now as Travis sat alone in the basement, he wondered if that promise had been a trap, not a duty. The sound of soft whimpering beside him pulled him from his thoughts. Sarge, his old German shepherd, was curled up on the thin rug near the heater that barely worked. The dog's coat had once been a shining example of the breed, sleek and powerful. Now it was matted with age, the gray and white fur clinging to his bones like a faded memory. Sarge had been with Travis for years, longer than any man, longer than any friend. And yet here they both were abandoned in this damp hole, betrayed by the very people they had protected. Travis's dark eyes softened as he looked at the dog. The arthritis had taken its toll, making it harder for Sarge to get around. His back legs were stiff, his body ached, but the old dog still had his loyalty, still had his heart. That's more than Travis could say for the people who had promised to care for him. "Easy there," Sarge Travis muttered under his breath, his voice low deep. He had always been a man of few words, and his words now were for the dog, the only one who could still understand him. He knelt on the cold concrete, his stiff knees cracking in protest, and gently placed his hands on the dog's hips, working to massage out some of the tension that had built up in his joints. Sarge let out a sigh, his tail giving a weak thump against the floor. He didn't complain. He never did. Travis's gaze shifted to the small bedside table next to him where a single framed photo, Saturday. It was the only personal item in the entire basement. The photo was worn at the edges, the glass scratched with time. It was of Grace taken years ago when she had still been healthy. Her eyes, like his, were brown, but they had a softness that his never did. Grace had been his one anchor in the world, until her death left him holding on to a promise that was slowly strangling him. "Promise me you'll look after Todd," Grace had asked him, her frail hand gripping his so tightly that it had almost hurt. Her breath had been shallow, her voice barely a whisper. I know he's foolish, but he's my blood. Don't let him fall. Travis had agreed without hesitation. It was the kind of promise a man made to the people he loved. He had looked after Todd at first, but now, after 2 years of living like a ghost in this basement, he wasn't so sure what that promise had meant. He ran his hand over the photograph, the edges curling in his grasp. For 2 years, he had sacrificed everything to protect Todd. He had given up his home, his savings, his dignity, all for a boy who had become a man he didn't recognize. The basement was proof of that. It was a constant reminder of how far he had fallen, how little he had left. The only thing that had kept him going through it all was the memory of his sister's plea and the unwavering loyalty of a dog who had never left his side. The sound of heavy footsteps above pounding on the floorboards broke his reverie. The ceiling creaked, the dust settling in the dim light. Then the door at the top of the stairs opened, spilling a wedge of artificial yellow light down the stairs, momentarily blinding him. Travis straightened his stiff back, protesting as he rose to his feet. He knew what was coming. It was always the same. Todd descended the stairs, his movements quick and nervous, as though he were looking for a way to escape even before he had fully entered. He was in his 30s now, his face drawn with anxiety, the worry etched into his features. The man who had once been a boy fishing with Travis by the river was now a stranger to him. He wasn't the same boy who had cried when he scraped his knee. Uncle Travis Todd said, his voice tight. He held a sheaf of papers in his hand, clutching them like a shield. I didn't mean to disturb you. Travis paused, his dark eyes meeting Todd's with an unsettling calm. The papers in his hands were nothing new, more bills, more demands that Travis had no power to stop. But something in Todd's nervous energy made Travis pause. The twitch in Todd's jaw, the way his gaze darted around the room, it was all wrong. Travis could sense the lie before it was even spoken. Todd swallowed, shifting his weight. It's just bills, Uncle, he said, his voice rising a bit too fast. The electricity, the water, everything's going up. You know how it is. Monica is stressed about the finances. Travis didn't say anything at first. He just stared at his nephew, waiting for him to explain. But Todd's gaze flickered to the small rug where Sarge lay, the dog's eyes heavy with the knowledge of what had been said, of what was coming. Todd cleared his throat and thrust the papers forward, not meeting Travis's eyes. I need you to sign this, he said, his voice tight. It's just for the insurance adjustment standard stuff. You know the drill. Travis glanced at the paper, then at Todd. The familiar pang of frustration tightened in his chest. The VA money, he asked quietly. He had seen this play before too many times. It was the 3rd of the month, and the deposit should have cleared by now. Todd flinched, his eyes flickering away. It's a system glitch at the regional office, he said quickly, his voice rising in pitch. A full audit of all accounts in the district. Your funds are frozen until it's resolved. Frozen. It wasn't the first time he had heard that excuse. It wasn't the first time Todd had explained away the missing money. But Travis was no fool. He had been alive long enough to spot a lie when he heard one. And this Travis motioned toward the paper. The bills, why do you need me to sign them? Todd hesitated, his nervousness growing. I'm just handling it, Uncle. Monica and I were trying to keep things together. But Travis wasn't listening anymore. He had heard enough. He had seen too much. He had trusted Todd, trusted him to protect him, to do what was right. But the truth had always been just beyond his grasp. And now, with every excuse and every lie, it became clear Todd wasn't trying to protect him. He was exploiting him. And in the process, he was stealing something Travis couldn't afford to lose, his dignity. Travis took the pen, his hand steady despite the rush of anger rising within him. His signature hit the paper with a finality that felt like a betrayal in itself. He signed it as he had every month before, as if it were the only thing left to do. But his spirit trembled under the weight of what it meant. Todd snatched the paper back without a word, his eyes darting up to the stairs as though eager to escape the tension in the room. But as Todd turned to leave, the unmistakable sound of Monica's voice echoed down from the top of the stairs. What is taking so long? Her tone was sharp, commanding. I'm coming, honey, Todd called back. His voice was higher, like a child seeking approval. Monica's footsteps grew louder as she descended the stairs. Her eyes locked onto Sarge immediately, and a flicker of disgust passed over her face. The dog had lifted his head at the sound of her aggression, letting out a low, uneasy rumble. You told me to keep that beast away from the laundry chute, Monica spat at Travis. She shot a venomous glance at the dog. He barely moves from this rug, Travis said, his voice rising, but not in anger, more in a desperate plea. He hated the way she spoke about Sarge. She didn't understand. She didn't see the loyalty, the bond between them. Monica snapped. Keep him down here or he goes to the pound. Todd, his voice rising in defense, quickly intervened. Okay, he stays down here. We'll work it out. Monica shot one last glare at Travis before storming back up the stairs, her heels clicking sharply on the wooden steps. Todd followed her, muttering, "I'm sorry, Uncle. I'll take care of it." The lock on the door clicked, and Travis was alone again. The silence in the basement was almost deafening, broken only by the sound of Sarge's low whine. The dog, too, understood. They were both prisoners now. Prisoners to a promise. Prisoners to a family that had turned its back on them. And in that silence, as the rain continued to hammer against the windows, Travis felt something shift. It wasn't just the anger. It was the realization that he couldn't stay here any longer. He couldn't live in this basement, this cage, any longer. He had to get out. He had to protect what little he had left. And the only way to do that was to escape. Travis sat motionless, the weight of the crumpled bank statement pressing against his fingers. He had found it in the trash earlier, half hidden among a mess of food wrappers and crumpled paper. At first he thought it was just another bill, another mistake, another empty demand. But then he saw the logo, Rainier Commercial Bank. His own name printed at the top. A chill ran down his spine. He smoothed out the paper, feeling his pulse quicken as he scanned the balance. It was more than he had ever expected, more than he had ever been told. $4,000, his pension. It wasn't frozen like Todd had claimed. It was still there, trickling out through withdrawals and purchases, every penny siphoned off for someone else's gain. Emerald Queen Casino. Nordstrom. Muckleshoot Casino. Liquor store. His money, his blood flowing out into the hands of his nephew and his wife. The realization hit Travis like a blow to the gut. For 2 years he had been told his funds were locked up in some bureaucratic mess. For 2 years he had lived with the humiliation of relying on Todd's charity. But this, the proof that he had been robbed by the very people he had trusted, brought him to the edge. His fists clenched a fire igniting inside him that had long been dormant. He stood up abruptly, the crumpled paper still clenched in his hand, the anger flooding his chest. He had been a soldier, a man who fought, who survived. He wasn't going to let them do this. Not anymore. Sarge whimpered softly at his side, the old dog lifting his head as if sensing the change in Travis's energy. His joints ached with the cold, but Sarge knew something was wrong. He had been Travis's companion for 12 years, had watched over him through every battle, both external and internal, and now once again, Travis had to protect the one thing he had left. He walked briskly to the stairs, his knees creaking as he ascended. His mind was spinning, each thought flashing like a combat tactic. The game had changed. No longer was he a prisoner in this basement. He wasn't just going to wait for Todd's excuses anymore. He couldn't. Not when there was something to fight for. Not when Sarge's life was on the line. As Travis reached the top of the stairs, his hand froze on the door handle. He heard the voices, faint but distinct, drifting down from the kitchen above. Todd. Monica. Their words were quiet, but their meaning was crystal clear. "We kill the dog." Monica's voice rang out, cold and calculated. "Then we lock the old man away for good." Travis's blood turned to ice. The betrayal was deeper than he had imagined. They weren't just stealing his money. They were planning to end his life and Sarge's. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a cold determination setting in. His pulse raced. He could almost hear the ticking of the clock now, each second slipping away, and with it the chance to act. He didn't wait. He shoved the door open and stepped into the hallway, the sound of his boots echoing through the quiet house. The warmth of the kitchen, the faint smell of food, felt like a mocking contrast to the cold fury building inside him. His hand was still clutching the bank statement, the evidence of his betrayal. He didn't need to look at it anymore. He didn't need to know how deep the lies ran. Todd was at the kitchen counter, hunched over his phone. Monica stood by the stove, stirring a pot with quick, sharp movements. They didn't even notice him at first. It was almost as if they were waiting for him to make a move. Uncle Travis, Todd said without looking up, his voice tight, like he was trying to keep the truth locked behind his words. "I didn't mean to disturb you." Travis didn't respond immediately. His gaze was fixed on Todd, his nephew, the man who had sworn to care for him, but had instead slowly bled him dry. He saw the twitch in Todd's jaw, the subtle nervousness in the way he shifted from foot to foot. Travis had been through enough to know when someone was hiding something, and Todd was hiding everything. "I need you to sign this," Todd said, thrusting a document toward him. His eyes were wide now, almost pleading. "It's just a confirmation for the insurance adjustment. Standard stuff." Travis didn't take the paper. Instead, he held up the crumpled statement he had found in the trash, the evidence that everything Todd had told him for the past 2 years had been a lie. His voice was low, heavy with controlled anger. "The VA money," he said. "Where is it, Todd? You told me it was frozen. The deposit should have cleared today." Todd flinched, his face pale as he stepped back, trying to regain his composure. It's just a glitch, Uncle. You know how these things go, red tape audits. It's all a mess. But don't worry, I'm handling it. Travis stepped forward, his gaze never leaving Todd's eyes. Frozen for 2 years, he asked, his voice rising with the weight of each word. And now you expect me to believe this glitch? I've trusted you, Todd. For 2 years I've trusted you, and you've lied to me. Todd opened his mouth, but the words never came. He couldn't explain away the evidence, couldn't brush off the lies anymore. Behind them, Monica's voice cut through the tension, sharp and dismissive. I told you he would find out, she snapped, stepping forward, her eyes flashing with a mix of annoyance and something darker. You always let him snoop around. This is what happens. Travis turned to her, his fury now fully unleashed. I didn't snoop, Monica. I found it. I found your lies. All of it. You've been stealing from me, and now you're planning to kill my dog. Monica's expression shifted from defensive to cold, almost calculating. That dog, she sneered, her voice dripping with venom, is the last thing tying you to any kind of decency. You don't even care about the money, do you, Travis? You care about him. Sarge, hearing the aggression in her voice, let out a low growl, his hackles rising in warning. But Travis wasn't focused on her anymore. His mind was set. He had 2 choices: let them continue to rob him, rob his dog, rob his honor, or fight back. You're right about one thing, Monica, Travis said, his voice low and resolute. I care about him, and if you think for 1 second that I'm going to let you take him, you've made a grave mistake. Monica took a step back, but it wasn't fear in her eyes, it was something colder, more calculating. You don't have a choice, she said, her voice venomous. We've already decided what happens next. The finality in her voice made something inside Travis snap. For 2 years he had endured this. For 2 years he had swallowed his pride, tried to maintain the peace, tried to keep his promise, but now he had nothing left to lose. His loyalty to Grace, his promise to protect Todd had led him here, but it was a path he could no longer follow. I'm done, Travis said, his voice firm. I'm done letting you take from me. The words hung in the air like the storm outside, dark and dangerous. In that moment, Travis knew what he had to do. He didn't care if it meant leaving behind everything he had known. He didn't care if it meant walking away from the family he had sacrificed for. His only focus now was getting out, getting Sarge out, and he had hours, not days, to make it happen. Without another word, Travis turned and walked toward the stairs. His resolve was hardening with each step. He didn't need the pen. He didn't need Todd's lies. All he needed was his dog and the will to fight. The time had come to make a choice, survive or let everything he had lived for die. And as the door to the basement creaked open, Travis heard the faintest sound, the growl of Sarge, low and unwavering, a reminder that they were in this together. Tomorrow morning, everything would change. The cold rain pounded relentlessly against the small basement window, its rhythmic sound like a constant reminder of Travis's isolation. He sat at the edge of the sagging mattress, Sarge lying at his feet, his ears twitching slightly as the old dog remained alert, sensing the rising tension in the air. Travis's mind was racing. He had always been a man of action, decisive, quick, but the weight of the situation now seemed to anchor him in place. His legs ached with arthritis, his back stiff from years of hard labor, but the old soldier still had the fire in him. He had promised Grace he would look after Todd, but now, as the clock ticked away in the basement's dim light, Travis realized that promise had turned into a shackle, and the only way to break free was to act. The bank statement crumpled in his hands was all the evidence he needed. For 2 years, Todd had told him the same lie: the funds were frozen, caught in some bureaucratic nightmare. But now he had proof. Todd had been siphoning off Travis's pension, feeding it into casinos and shopping sprees, while Travis had been scraping by with nothing. The anger that had been simmering for days, weeks, months finally exploded, but it wasn't just anger. It was the feeling of being betrayed by family, by blood. Sarge shifted on the rug, his body heavy with the wear of age, but still alert, still connected to his master, in a way no one else could understand. Travis reached down, running his hand over the dog's coat, and the bond between them seemed to strengthen in that moment. Sarge had been with him through thick and thin. He had been there during the war, had seen Travis at his worst and his best. The dog had fought alongside him when the world seemed to fall apart, and now he would fight with him again. The basement was cold, but it wasn't just the temperature that made it unbearable. It was the suffocating reality of being trapped. Travis had been forced into this life by the very people he had tried to protect. He had lived in this dark corner of his home for 2 years, convinced that it was for Todd's benefit. But now it was clear that Todd was not the person Travis had believed him to be. He was a thief. And worse, he was willing to kill the dog, the last living thing in Travis's life that had never betrayed him. Tomorrow morning they're going to kill Sarge, Travis whispered to the dog, his voice a low rasp in the stillness. But not if I can help it. A wave of determination washed over him, and for the first time in a long while the fog of defeat lifted. He couldn't let it end this way. Not with Sarge's death. Not after everything they had been through. His mind flashed back to the war that had shaped him into the man he was today. He wasn't always the cold, unfeeling veteran that he appeared to be. There was a time many years ago when he had been just a boy with a rifle fighting for survival. It was 1972, and the jungle was thick with heat and tension. Travis had been stationed in Vietnam, a young soldier scared and still learning what it meant to fight. But it was in the thick of those dark days that he had learned what true loyalty meant. It wasn't just about blood, it was about trust, about standing by the ones who had your back no matter what. He remembered one mission in particular, a firefight that had gone terribly wrong. They had been ambushed in a dense thicket, the sound of gunfire, deafening the air thick with smoke and fear. Travis had been pinned down, his squad scattered, and in that moment he had thought he was going to die. But then through the smoke, he saw a figure emerge. A fellow soldier, Sergeant Williams, had crawled through enemy fire, pulling Travis to safety. Williams had risked his life for him without a second thought. It was a moment of loyalty that had changed Travis forever. It had solidified in him the belief that loyalty was something you gave and received in the most dire of circumstances. It was a bond that once formed could never be broken. The memory of that day stirred something deep within him. That was the kind of loyalty Sarge had shown him all these years. No matter what had happened, no matter how far they had fallen, Sarge had never wavered. And now, Travis had to honor that loyalty, just as he had honored the bonds forged in the war. He couldn't let Monica and Todd take that from him, not without a fight. He looked down at Sarge, who had risen to his feet, his tail giving a weak thump as he sensed his master's change in demeanor. Sarge's brown eyes met Travis's full of understanding. The dog didn't need words. He never did. "You ready, old man?" Travis asked quietly, his voice rough with emotion. Sarge let out a soft grunt as if to say, "Let's get this done." Travis exhaled slowly and began moving toward the small duffel bag at the foot of his bed. The plan had already begun to take shape in his mind. It wasn't going to be easy. He would have to act fast, work quickly, and trust his instincts. But for the first time in months, he felt something stir inside him, a sense of purpose, a reason to fight. He grabbed the bag, rummaging through it to find the essentials. His blood pressure medication was there, along with a flashlight, a bottle of water, and a change of clothes. But it wasn't the clothes that mattered now. It wasn't the medication. It was the need to survive. He needed to get out. He needed to escape before they could make good on their threat to kill Sarge. As he packed, his mind kept returning to the same question. How had it come to this? How had he allowed himself to be trapped like this, living under the control of people who cared only for their own gain? He thought about Grace, her dying, and words still fresh in his memory. "Promise me you'll look after Todd." He had kept that promise, and for 2 years he had paid the price for it. But now he realized something he hadn't understood before. Protecting Todd didn't mean sacrificing himself, and it certainly didn't mean sacrificing Sarge. He would never let them take Sarge, not while he still had breath in his lungs. The rain outside intensified, a constant reminder of the ticking clock, but Travis didn't let it distract him. He had a plan and he was going to execute it. There was no turning back now. With the bag packed, he turned to face the basement door. His heart pounded in his chest, the adrenaline of the moment pumping through his veins. Sarge limped toward him, his body stiff from age but his spirit unbroken. Travis smiled softly. "You and me, buddy," he whispered. "Let's get out of here." Travis took a step toward the door, the weight of his decision heavy but final. He wasn't going to wait for Todd to make the next move. He wasn't going to wait for Monica to pull the trigger. The time for waiting was over. It was time to act. With one last glance at the small room he had been trapped in for 2 years, Travis stepped out into the dark hallway ready to fight for his freedom and for the dog who had never once let him down. The quiet hum of the house seemed to amplify Travis's every movement as he ascended the narrow stairs. The faint scent of cooking from the kitchen above did little to calm his nerves. His boots creaked on the wooden steps, the sound muffled by the heavy silence of the house. Sarge, trailing just behind him, let out a soft whine, a low rumble of discomfort that matched Travis's own unease. The dog wasn't as spry as he used to be. Age had caught up to him. But the old German shepherd still had that sharp sense, that loyalty, that made him more than just a pet. Sarge was family. They reached the top of the stairs, and Travis paused at the door. He couldn't help but take a deep breath before he pushed it open. He wasn't sure what he was about to walk into, but he was certain it wasn't going to be a simple confrontation. He had no idea how Todd would react or if Monica would make good on her threat. But it didn't matter anymore. He wasn't just protecting himself anymore, he was protecting Sarge, the one living creature left in his life who had never failed him. The kitchen was eerily still. Monica stood near the stove, her back to him, while Todd sat at the kitchen island, his face drawn in a tight, anxious expression. Neither of them noticed him immediately, which gave him a moment to study them. Todd was the first to break the silence. Uncle Travis Todd said, his voice strained, almost apologetic. I didn't think you'd be up yet. We were just, discussing some things. Things Travis muttered under his breath, his gaze sharp as it flickered to the back of Todd's head. The lies had been mounting for months, but now it was time to confront them head on. His eyes shifted to Monica, whose cold demeanor betrayed the calculation in her actions. She didn't even glance in his direction. Travis's jaw tightened. If she was still going to play the part of a concerned wife, he had no patience for it. Not anymore, Todd. Travis said, his voice calm, though a fire burned deep within him. I found something you missed. Todd's expression flickered. It was quick, but it didn't escape Travis. He'd spent his entire life reading people, reading the small signs, the subtle shifts in behavior. Todd knew what was coming. His nephew's guilt was written all over his face. What are you talking about? Todd asked, his voice rising slightly as he avoided Travis's gaze. Travis pulled the bank statement from his coat pocket, holding it up like a badge of honor, as if it were the only thing left that could expose the truth. Monica's eyes narrowed when she saw it, but she didn't speak. Todd's face drained of color. How do you explain this? Todd Travis's voice was tight, each word punctuated with a deep breath. The VA money is not frozen. I've seen the withdrawals, the casinos, the shopping. What the hell is going on? Todd's hands began to shake. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at Monica for support. She didn't offer him any. I didn't want you to worry, Todd stammered, trying to gather his thoughts. It's been a little tight lately. The house, the bills. I was just trying to make sure everything was covered. Covered. Travis's voice dropped dangerously low. You've been covering your gambling addiction with my money, Todd. And don't think for a second that I don't know what's been going on in this house. You've been bleeding me dry. Monica stepped forward, her gaze hardening. You don't understand, Travis, she snapped her words, dripping with venom. We've been taking care of you, your bills, your everything. You're living here because of us. You're just too old and confused to see it. The way she said old was like a slap in the face, a reminder of everything he had sacrificed. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as she spoke. She wanted him to feel small, helpless, like a burden, but he wasn't going to let her do that anymore. Not now. Not when the truth was laid out in black and white. Taking care of me, Travis's voice rose, now no longer controlled, no longer tempered. You've been using me, using my money, using my trust. And now you've made plans to kill my dog, your dog Todd. His voice shook with the rage he could no longer hide. Sarge, sensing the tension, let out a low growl and stepped forward, positioning himself between Travis and Monica. His hackles were raised, his body rigid. Despite his age, the dog still had the heart of a soldier, standing guard over Travis like he always had. Monica flinched at the growl, but she quickly recovered, her cold gaze narrowing. That dog is in the way, Travis. He's an old, sick animal. He's not even useful anymore. We're just trying to make life easier for everyone. You should thank us. Travis felt the heat of his fury rise, but he knew he couldn't let her provoke him. He turned his attention back to Todd. His nephew wasn't the man Travis had tried so desperately to save. He wasn't the boy he had taught how to fish, how to build a fire. He wasn't even the son of his sister Grace. Todd was something else now, something ugly, something Travis couldn't save anymore. You're not going to get away with this, Todd. Travis said, his words cold and final. I'm done with your lies. And if you think you can take Sarge from me, you're wrong. Todd's eyes flickered with uncertainty. He had always known Travis as a man of principle, a man of integrity. He had known deep down that Travis was no fool. But the fear in Todd's eyes now, the way he shifted in his seat, spoke volumes. He knew he was cornered. He knew Travis wasn't backing down. You don't know what you're doing, Uncle Todd, said, his voice shaking. We were just trying to help. We're family. We were family, Travis shot back. But you've forgotten what that means. I'm not going to let you hurt Sarge. Not now, not ever. And if you think I'm going to stand by and watch you steal from me again, you're wrong. I'm getting out of here. Monica moved quickly to the door, locking it with a quick twist of the knob. You're not going anywhere, Travis. Not until you sign the affidavit. We've already made arrangements. Once you sign, everything goes away. We get the money. You get to stay here and keep pretending you're in control. Travis took a deep breath, feeling the tension in his chest. It was like every muscle in his body was screaming at him to take action, to fight back. The clock was ticking. He could feel it in his bones. He had to move fast. He couldn't afford to let them control the narrative any longer. "You think this is over?" Travis asked, his voice steady, despite the storm brewing inside him. "You think you can just lock me in here and make me sign a piece of paper? Well, you're wrong. You're not going to steal from me anymore." Todd looked at him helplessly, his face pale. Monica's expression, however, was unflinching. She had already decided what needed to be done, and she wasn't backing down. Travis took a step back, his hand instinctively reaching for the worn leather jacket that hung by the door. The time for talking was over. There would be no more silence. The plan was in motion. It was time to act. "I'm not signing anything," Travis said, his voice low and resolute. "But I will walk out of here with my dog. Your choice, Todd. Let me go, or make me fight." He turned toward the door, his back to them now. Sarge, sensing the change in the air, padded quietly to his side. The dog's gaze remained focused on Todd and Monica, unwavering as though he too was waiting for their move. "I'm done with this house." Travis continued more to himself than anyone else. "I'm done with you both." The moment stretched between them thick and suffocating. Monica stood still, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Todd, on the other hand, looked lost, as if he had been caught in a web of his own lies, and didn't know how to untangle himself. The silence was broken only by the sound of rain tapping against the window, the cold, steady beat of time running out. Travis opened the door with one swift motion, and the cold air rushed in, filling the room with the scent of wet earth and desperation. "I'm leaving," Travis said, his voice firm, and with that he stepped into the night. But the storm wasn't over. The moment Travis stepped out into the rain, the door slammed behind him with a finality that reverberated through his entire body. The cold was a jolt, sharp and biting, but it did nothing to stop the fire that had ignited within him. His boots hit the wet pavement with a rhythm that matched his heart, each step deliberate, each one further away from the betrayal that had shackled him for too long. Sarge, loyal as always, was right by his side, his limp more pronounced in the dampness of the night, but still unwavering. The old dog's breath came in short bursts, a reminder of the years they had both survived together and alone. For a moment, Travis thought about his cabin, his old life in the high country, the life that had been sold off piece by piece to pay for Todd's debts. His life had been consumed by promises and obligations until there was nothing left for him but a basement and the harsh reality that the people he trusted most had betrayed him. He had believed he was helping, but in the end it had only been a slow, quiet surrender. As he walked, his thoughts drifted back to a time when things had been simpler, when he wasn't trapped by lies and family obligations. It was late spring, 1972, and Travis had been stationed in Vietnam. The days were long, the nights even longer, filled with tension and uncertainty. But there had been moments when the chaos of the war faded and all that mattered was survival. He remembered a mission that stood out among the rest. A routine patrol turned into an ambush. They were pinned down the jungle around them alive, with the sound of gunfire. Travis had taken cover, his rifle steady in his hands, but the weight of responsibility had pressed on him like a boulder. Then he saw Sergeant Williams, a man he had come to respect, crawl through the thick brush dodging bullets to drag him to safety. "You're not alone," Morgan Williams had said, his voice raspy but unwavering. "I got you." That moment, that loyalty, had been a lifeline for Travis. It had been the first time in the war that he felt like he wasn't fighting alone. And that was when Travis realized the bond he shared with Williams went beyond comradeship, it was brotherhood. That kind of loyalty was something Travis had carried with him ever since, and it had shaped him into the man he was today. But now here, in the rain-soaked streets of Seattle, that bond was being tested again. This time the loyalty wasn't to a fellow soldier, it was to a dog. A dog who had never wavered, who had stood by his side through every hardship, through every lonely night when the weight of the world had been too much to bear. He glanced down at Sarge, whose brown eyes were trained on him, full of understanding and trust. They had both seen their share of battles. The physical toll of time had been heavy on the dog's body, but his spirit was unbroken. He had been Travis's constant companion since the day Grace had died, and in a way, he had been the one to save Travis just as Travis had saved him. Travis knew this escape wasn't going to be easy. Monica and Todd wouldn't let them go quietly. He could already hear the wheels of the house turning the inevitable chase that was about to begin. But Travis didn't care. He wasn't going to wait around for them to corner him. He was done being a prisoner in his own home. The rain hit his face like 1,000 needles, but it didn't matter. His skin, already chilled by the years of neglect, hardly noticed. He had felt colder, had felt worse, but this time he had purpose. This time he wasn't running from his family's betrayal. He was moving forward with Sarge at his side. They reached the alleyway behind the house, the air thick with the scent of wet concrete and the distant echo of the city's hum. The world around him felt strangely silent, as if the rain had somehow muted everything, leaving only the sound of his boots slapping against the wet ground. He could hear Sarge's claws clicking behind him, but the dog didn't falter, didn't stop to rest. It was as if Sarge knew this was their last chance. This was the escape they had been waiting for. Travis turned his head slightly, glancing toward the streetlights that flickered dimly in the distance. He didn't know where he was going, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was that they were leaving. Leaving the lies, the cold basement, the house full of deceit and false promises. His thoughts briefly flickered to Grace. Her face etched in his memory was a bittersweet image. He could still hear her voice in his head, weak and raspy, as she made him promise to take care of Todd. She had been dying, her body fragile and broken, but in that moment she had clung to the belief that Todd was still worth saving. "I promised you, Grace," Travis whispered to the rain. "But I've done all I can. Todd's a man now, and it's time for him to face his own mistakes." The memory of that promise lingered in his chest like a stone, but he knew what he had to do. Todd had betrayed him. Todd had betrayed Grace's memory by stealing from him and then planning to kill Sarge. There was no room for sentimentality anymore. There was only the cold, hard truth. He and Sarge had made it this far, and now they were both free. The thought sent a rush of adrenaline through Travis's veins. The way forward wasn't clear, but it was theirs to choose. He couldn't undo the years he had spent trying to save Todd. He couldn't undo the lies that had been told, the trust that had been broken. But he could take control now. He could protect Sarge. And so they walked. The rain was relentless, but it didn't stop them. The alleyway narrowed and the sound of their footsteps grew louder, more urgent, as if the world was waking up to the decision Travis had made. They were no longer running from the people who had betrayed them. They were running toward freedom. In the distance, the hum of traffic grew louder, a reminder of the city they were leaving behind. It was a familiar sound, but it felt distant now, almost alien. Travis didn't belong there anymore. He didn't belong in that house, or in that life. The city was no longer his to claim. But the mountains were where he had found himself before. They were where he had been born. Sarge had once followed him into those mountains. Together they had conquered every challenge nature had thrown at them. And now the two of them were about to leave behind the remnants of a life built on lies and start a new chapter somewhere far from the cold grip of betrayal. But they weren't out of danger yet. Travis knew that for all their courage, for all their resolve, the road ahead was uncertain. The ticking clock was always in the back of his mind. Todd would come for them. Monica would come for them. They weren't just going to let them walk away. And Travis could already feel the weight of their footsteps getting closer. They had to move fast. The air was thick with moisture, and the distant streetlights cast long shadows on the wet pavement. Sarge's tail thumped softly against the ground, a quiet rhythm that kept them in sync. They were two old souls walking into the night, leaving the world of lies behind. They had survived together for years, and they would survive this too. Together. Travis didn't know how much longer they had before the chase began, but it didn't matter. With each step they took, they were closer to freedom. They were closer to the mountains. The night was suffocatingly quiet as they walked deeper into the industrial outskirts of Seattle. The rain had eased off, leaving the air cold and damp, but Travis wasn't focused on the weather anymore. His mind was on the road ahead, on the constant pressure building behind him. Monica and Todd would come for them. He knew it, but there was no turning back now. He had been prepared to fight for his freedom, but what if it wasn't enough? What if their pursuit was relentless? Sarge's limp had worsened since they'd left the house, and with every step, Travis could hear the dog's breathing grow more strained. His faithful companion had seen it all, the battles, the hard times, the lonely nights, but even Sarge couldn't fight Father Time. The pain in the old dog's legs was a constant reminder of how much they had both endured. Yet Sarge never complained. He walked with Travis, his head held high, his tail still wagging occasionally, a reminder of the bond they shared. They reached a deserted stretch of road. The hum of distant traffic was all that could be heard, mixing with the occasional thud of Sarge's paw hitting the wet asphalt. The world around them seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Travis's eyes were sharp, scanning the shadows around them. He had always been aware of his surroundings. The instinct to be alert to anticipate danger had been honed over years of service, and it hadn't faded. Every corner they turned felt like a potential threat. He couldn't afford to be caught off guard. Not with Sarge slowing down, not with the danger so close behind. Not much farther, Buddy Travis muttered under his breath. He patted Sarge on the head, his heart heavy with guilt. Every step felt like a race against time, against the people who were coming for them. But something wasn't right. He stopped, his hand instinctively resting on the strap of his duffel bag. He could feel it like a pulse, something beneath the surface that didn't belong. It was too quiet. Sarge stopped beside him, his ears twitching at the same moment. The dog's eyes were scanning the shadows, a low growl starting deep in his chest. Travis's breath hitched. He knew this sound. This was the warning. They weren't alone. Before Travis could react, headlights cut through the night, their sharp beams piercing the fog and darkness. The sound of a vehicle revving closer echoed in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. "Damn it," Travis whispered to himself. His heart rate spiked. He could feel the anxiety, the panic bubbling beneath his skin. They were being hunted. Todd and Monica had to have found them by now. The faint hope he'd clung to that they might escape unnoticed was shattered. They would never stop until they had Travis and Sarge. The vehicle approached rapidly, the engine growling as it neared. Travis didn't need to see it to know who was behind the wheel. He had heard that engine before, the roar of a powerful truck that could only belong to one type of driver. Truckers. Travis muttered, a new sense of dread filling him. He knew they had to make a decision fast. His heart was thudding in his chest, and as the vehicle grew closer, his mind raced with calculations. The truck wasn't just approaching, it was headed straight for them. He pulled Sarge closer, crouching low behind a crumbling brick wall at the edge of a dilapidated warehouse. His instincts were on high alert now. He scanned the area around them quickly, looking for a place to hide away to avoid detection. The rain had cleared enough to make movement visible, but the dark shadows of the alley gave them some coverage. For now, the truck's headlights suddenly flickered, and Travis instinctively jerked back into the shadows. The truck slowed as it passed the low hum of the engine rumbling through the ground beneath them. Sarge let out a quiet whimper as if sensing the tension in the air. "Stay quiet," Travis whispered harshly, his voice tense. The dog's response was immediate, his large, muscular body pressing against Travis's leg. Travis peered around the corner, eyes narrowed. The truck had come to a stop just beyond the reach of their hiding spot. He could hear the gravel crunching under tires. The truck doors opened with a groan and the sound of boots hitting the wet ground followed. 2 men were walking toward them. Travis's instincts screamed to run to move, but Sarge's weight, still too much for him to lift on his own, was slowing him down. The rain had been relentless enough to make the dog's joints flare up again, and the slow but steady ache in his own knees was becoming almost unbearable. He looked at Sarge's eyes, softening for just a moment. The dog's presence was a source of strength, but in moments like this, it felt like an anchor weighing him down. Travis knew Sarge couldn't make the sprint without help, and he could feel the minutes slipping away. With no other choice, he slowly crouched and adjusted his grip on the dog. "I'm sorry, boy," he muttered, his voice strained. "But we can't run now. We need to wait them out." Sarge let out a low whine but didn't move. Travis held his breath, hoping the men wouldn't notice them. One of the men's voices floated through the still air, muffled but clear enough to understand. He was here. "I saw the dog tracks," the man said. "You think he's hiding out in this old warehouse? No way to know for sure," came the reply. The second man's voice was gruff low. "We'll split up. Search the area. If he's here, we'll find him." The fear that Travis had been holding back was finally giving way to a deep, cold anger. His grip on Sarge tightened, and he could feel the dog's pulse under his hand. He wasn't going to let them take Sarge, not without a fight. But there was no time. He needed to move. Travis waited until the sound of footsteps grew distant, then shifted with Sarge, ready to make a break for it. He didn't know if the men had seen him. He didn't know if they were about to storm the warehouse. All he knew was that in the next few minutes he would either make it to safety or he would be caught. The stakes were higher than ever before. He had just hours to protect his only family, Sarge, and get away from the people who had betrayed him. As he adjusted his position, a thought flashed through his mind, one that gave him a renewed sense of purpose. "I promised Grace I would look after Todd. I did that. But I will not be his scapegoat. I will not sacrifice everything for a man who has no honor." The footsteps grew louder, then stopped. Travis's body tensed, every muscle coiled like a spring. It was now or never. And as Sarge's tail gave a faint thump against the ground, Travis knew what he had to do. He'd fought battles before, but this was the final one, the one that would define the rest of his life. He stood gripping Sarge tightly and began to move. The rain was a constant smattering down in thick sheets, cutting through the night like an icy knife. But for Travis Morgan, the cold was a distant feeling compared to the rush in his chest. Every step he took seemed like it could be his last, but he didn't stop. He couldn't afford to. Sarge, his ever-loyal German shepherd, struggled to keep up his once firm stride, faltering under the weight of age and pain. His joints creaked, but the dog pressed on, matching his master's pace. The alley they had entered was narrow and dark. Travis could hear the trucker's engines rumbling in the distance. He felt the weight of time and fear creeping behind him. Monica and Todd weren't far off. The idea of being caught was too real now. Their footsteps would soon echo through the street, and then it would be too late. He glanced down at Sarge, the dog's sharp eyes never leaving the road ahead. The animal's breath came in shallow bursts. The arthritis had taken its toll, but Sarge's spirit was indomitable. The old dog was more than just a companion. He was a part of Travis's soul, a constant through every hardship, every battle. "You're not going anywhere, buddy," Travis whispered, his voice barely rising above the sound of the storm. "Not while I'm breathing." They reached the truck, a rusty, dilapidated semi abandoned at the far end of the alley. The engine was still running the faint hum, a sign of hope, a lifeline. The air was thick with tension as Travis scanned the area one last time. He could feel the eyes of the men on him now. He didn't need to see them to know that they were closing in. Monica no doubt would have already alerted them. Todd's frantic energy was unmistakable even from a distance. He wouldn't let Travis slip away without a fight. But this wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about dignity, about making sure they didn't win. "Let's go, Sarge," Travis said firmly, his voice catching in his throat. He knew there wasn't much time. Sarge limped forward, his legs moving slowly but steadily. Every step was a testament to the bond between them. Travis had helped Sarge over the years, but now the dog was helping him. In this moment, it wasn't just about getting away. It was about saving what was left of their lives. Sarge had earned that. Travis reached the semi, and the thought that Buck might be inside was a fleeting hope. He yanked the door open without hesitation, the door creaking under the strain. The truck's lights flickered slightly as he pulled Sarge inside. The dog stumbled, but found his balance settling next to Travis in the passenger seat. The interior smelled of diesel and leather, familiar, comfortable. Buck the trucker, who had helped him escape once before, was at the wheel. His face was grim, his eyes sharp, despite the late hour. The sound of the truck's engine roared to life, drowning out the storm outside. "Travis," Buck said, glancing at him with a raised eyebrow. "Where's the rest of your stuff?" Travis shook his head, his jaw tight. "There's nothing left to go back for," he muttered. "It's just me and Sarge now, and I'm not going back to that life. Not for anyone." Buck nodded, his eyes flicking to Sarge briefly before focusing on the road ahead. "I figured as much. You good to go?" "Yeah," Travis answered, his voice steady. "Let's get out of here." The truck lurched forward, gaining speed as it cut through the wet streets. Travis watched as the familiar sights of Seattle blurred in the rearview mirror. The past, everything he had once known, was disappearing with every mile. The betrayal, the lies, the debt. All of it was fading into the distance as if it had never been real. But the closer they got to freedom, the more Travis could feel the weight of his decisions press down on him. He had left his family behind. He had abandoned Todd, the nephew he had once promised to protect. He had done everything to keep that promise, sacrificing his savings, his home, his honor. And yet in the end it hadn't mattered. Todd had thrown it all away. That was the hardest part, watching the boy he had once tried to shape into a man fall so far. His promise to Grace, his sister, dying and trusting him to look after Todd, had led him down this path. But now Travis could see clearly. Todd had taken advantage of that promise. He had stolen from him, manipulated him, and even planned to kill Sarge. There was no redemption for Todd now. He had sealed his fate the moment he decided to betray Travis for his own gain. Sarge, sensing the heaviness in the air, lifted his head from Travis's lap and looked up at him with those soulful brown eyes. A low whine escaped his throat as if he was asking if it was over. Travis placed a hand on his dog's head, his fingers running through the damp fur. "We're out of there now, buddy," Travis whispered, trying to reassure himself as much as the dog. "We're free." But the feeling of freedom didn't come as easily as he had hoped. It was overshadowed by the overwhelming sense of loss. His mind kept drifting back to the moments of doubt, to the small pieces of the man he had once been. Had he done enough for Todd? Had he failed? His sister failed? Grace's memory? A sharp turn jolted him out of his thoughts. Buck's voice was low, but it cut through the silence. "We're not out of the woods yet," Buck said, his eyes scanning the road. "There are people after you. They're gonna come looking." Travis didn't answer right away. His thoughts were swirling, torn between his past obligations and the brutal clarity that Todd had left him with. What had happened to the boy he had taken fishing as a child, the boy who had called him Uncle Travis with nothing but admiration in his eyes? But it was too late now for regrets, too late for what-ifs. "They won't catch us," Travis said, the certainty in his voice, surprising even him. The decision was final. The moment to turn back had long since passed. "I won't let them." Buck was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke again, his voice tinged with something like understanding. "Yeah, well, that's a soldier talking right there." Travis didn't respond. He just nodded, staring at the road ahead. The miles were stretching out before them, each one further from the life he had left behind. They were heading toward a place where the past couldn't follow, a place where he could finally rebuild with Sarge at his side. Minutes passed, then hours, and Travis's thoughts drifted again, this time to the strange sense of peace that had settled over him. He was still angry, still hurt, but there was something liberating in knowing that he could leave it all behind. That he wasn't chained to that basement, to Todd's lies, to Monica's cold demands. It wasn't just the house that had held him prisoner. It was the memories, the guilt, the promises. But now they were nothing. The years of living in a basement, of being mistreated, were finally over. As the truck rumbled through the rain, the thought of what came next was both daunting and freeing. Where would they go? What would they do? He wasn't sure yet, but for the first time in years, Travis felt a spark of hope. They weren't running away anymore. They were moving towards something better. The truck slowed as they approached the outskirts of town. Buck was still focused on the road, his hands steady on the wheel, but Travis could see the subtle signs of exhaustion on his face. "I've got a place not too far from here," Buck said, breaking the silence. "You two can rest up there for the night. You don't have to keep moving if you don't want to. Just get some sleep." Travis felt a wave of gratitude. He wasn't used to people offering help without asking for something in return. But Buck had been there when it counted. He had helped Travis when he was at his lowest, when the whole world seemed to have turned its back on him. Now he was offering them safety, even if only for a night. "You sure?" Travis asked. "I don't want to impose." "Don't worry about it," Buck said with a shrug. "I'm not in the habit of leaving a man out in the cold. Not after all the things we've seen." They didn't need to say more. Travis understood. The truck turned off the highway onto a smaller, quieter road, leading them through trees that appeared to be cloaked in a heavy fog. The air was thick with moisture, and the distant mountains loomed like silent sentinels. It felt like they were heading into a new world, a place where they could finally find peace away from the chaos of the life they had left behind. Sarge lay his head down once more, his breathing slow and steady. "Rest up, old friend," Travis whispered, looking down at the dog. In the rearview mirror, the lights of Seattle were fading into the distance, swallowed by the fog and the rain. There was no going back, and for the first time in a long time, Travis Morgan felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had been to hell and back, but with Sarge by his side, he knew one thing: they were going to make it. As the truck turned onto a narrow road, disappearing into the darkness, Travis allowed himself to breathe just for a moment. Tomorrow they would face whatever came next. But for tonight, they had found a place to rest. And that was enough. The morning after the world seemed a little softer, the fog that had gripped Timber Falls the night before lifting to reveal a pale blue sky stretched across the horizon. The light filtering through the trees gave everything a quiet glow, like the earth itself was exhaling after a long, restless night. Travis stood outside the small cabin. Buck had led them to his hands, shoved deep into his coat pockets, the air crisp against his skin. Sarge was beside him, the old dog limping slightly but moving with a renewed vigor. For the first time in a long time, Travis didn't feel like a man running from his past. He felt like he was standing solid and resolute in the present. The truth, hard as it had been to face, had set him free. And now, with Sarge at his side, there was nothing left to fear. They had driven through a lifetime of storms, literal and figurative. They had fought wars, fought for survival, fought for honor. But in the end, Travis realized that survival wasn't just about fighting. It was about standing tall in the face of everything that had tried to tear him down, and finding peace in the places he never thought he would. He had left behind the crumbling promises, the house that had once been a symbol of family and duty. And now, standing on this quiet porch, looking out at the rugged beauty of the mountains, Travis understood that a man's worth wasn't tied to his home or his legacy, it was tied to his choices, his ability to stand up, to walk away from betrayal, to rise from the ashes of his past and choose something better. He looked down at Sarge, the old dog who had always been there. Sarge's eyes met his steady, and filled with an understanding that spoke louder than words ever could. The dog had never asked for anything more than loyalty in return, and Travis had never once failed him. Now Sarge's presence wasn't just a reminder of the past, but a beacon of what remained: unwavering loyalty, love, and the promise that no matter what came next, they would face it together. Travis glanced at the cabin behind him. Buck had already left for his day's delivery, but there was a comfort in knowing they had a place to rest. A real place, a new beginning. No more hiding, no more fear of the people who had stolen from him. His fight was over. The law had taken care of the rest, and the betrayal had been laid bare for the world to see. But as he stood there, Sarge by his side, the realization hit him harder than ever before. He had learned the hard way, but he had learned. Sometimes it wasn't about the blood you shared. It was about the loyalty you kept. Family wasn't always the people who shared your name. It was the ones who stood by you when it mattered most. Travis had given everything for his sister's promise. He had sacrificed his own comfort, his future, and his peace for Todd. But Todd had broken that promise the moment he stole from him, the moment he chose greed over family. But not Sarge. Sarge had never wavered. Sarge had been there always, and now it was time for Travis to be there for the dog. They were a team, a pack, and together they would rebuild. "Come on, old boy," Travis whispered, his voice filled with warmth as he gently placed his hand on Sarge's broad back. The dog turned toward him, his tail thumping once against the porch, and together they walked down the steps, their paws and boots crunching on the frosty ground. The world ahead of them was wide open. There were no more ties to the past, only the road ahead and the quiet promise they had made to each other. No matter where they went, as long as they were together, they had everything they needed. The wind picked up slightly, a cool gust that rattled the leaves in the trees. It felt like the first real breath Travis had taken in years. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was living. And as he walked into the world with Sarge by his side, Travis knew that the future, no matter how uncertain, was theirs to claim.